Welcome back, class 10, your civics class. Today we will start with chapter 3. Start a new chapter. Previous chapter was the Union Executive, the President and the Vice President. Today we will start the Union Executive, the Prime Minister, the Union Cabinet and the Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister of India. The makers of our Constitution rejected the presidential system and adopted the British model of parliamentary or cabinet form of government. So, as we all know, our democracy runs under the parliamentary or cabinet form of ministry or government, not under the presidential system like the United States of America. They have the president at the top, very powerful, all powerful. But in Britain, they have their prime minister. The Constitution provides that there shall be a council of ministers with the prime minister at the head to aid and advise the president. So what does the Constitution provides? The Constitution provides that there shall be council of ministers. There should be council of ministers with the prime minister at their head. And what the prime minister will do? The prime minister will aid and advise the president. Here the word shall indicates that the president cannot function without the council of ministers. In the previous classes we have learned the true position of the president in India. The president in India works or functions according to the advice of the Council of Ministers. The President is the nominal or constitutional head of the government, but the active head of the government is the Prime Minister. So now comes the appointment of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is appointed by the President and other ministers are appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. See, what happens is when after a general election, a majority party wins, they already have a person in their mind, whom they will nominate as the Prime Minister. So they send the name of that particular person, and the Prime Minister and the President appoints that. After that person is nominated by the winning party and appointed by the President, that person gives the names of the persons who will be there in his Council of Ministers, and accordingly the President sends his appointment letter to them. So everything is basically done by the Council of Ministers, just the President signs and gives the appointment. The Prime Minister is the leader of the party or coalition which commands a majority in the Lok Sabha, obviously. So who is the Prime Minister? Prime Minister is the leader of the party, winning party, or coalition, that means 2-3 parties coming together and forming a majority, which commands a majority in the Lok Sabha. In appointing the Prime Minister, the President has very little power on making personal advice. The President generally does not have any power in appointing the person he wants to. Circumstances can, however, arise when the President may have to exercise some discretion. For example, when none of the parties gets a clear majority in Lok Sabha, that means we have learnt about such power of the President which comes under discretionary power, if you can remember. Okay. Position, powers, and functions of the Prime Minister. Now, to assess or to understand the position and power of the Prime Minister, we should understand or we should go through certain things. That means, what is the relationship between the President and the Prime Minister? What is the relationship between the Prime Minister and the Cabinet? And, or position rather, not relationship. And what is the position of the Prime Minister inside the Parliament? Position of Prime Minister as a leader of the nation? Position of Prime Minister in general. So, what is the position of Prime Minister and the President? How they are placed, and what is the technicalities that they share. Prime Minister is the link between the Cabinet and the President. The Cabinet, head of the Cabinet is Prime Minister, and link between the Cabinet, a group of ministers under the Prime Minister, and the President is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is the link between the Cabinet and the President. The decisions of the Cabinet are conveyed to the President through the Prime Minister. It is he who keeps the President informed on all matters of the government. So the Prime Minister keeps the President involved in all matters of the government. It is on the advice of the Prime Minister that the President summons, means calls, and prorogues the Parliament and dissolves the Lok Sabha. Who advises? The Prime Minister advises. When to call the summon the when to summon the Parliament, when to prorogue the Parliament, if it is necessary to dissolve the Lok Sabha. It may happen that a minister has taken a decision on some matter which has not been considered by the Council of Ministers. If so, the President may ask the Prime Minister to submit the matter for consideration of the Council. So, if any matter or any decision which is taken by a minister which has not been considered by the Council of Ministers, the President may ask the Prime Minister to submit the matter for consideration to the Council. So this is basically the relationship which the Prime Minister shares with the President and the President shares with the Prime Minister. Now, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. Prime Minister is the keystone of the Cabinet arch. Arch is this, it's a shape on top of sometimes in old buildings and some new buildings also they have doorways with an arch, semicircular. So the main stone or the main person who holds that arch, the arch is the Cabinet. Arch over here is the Cabinet. Who holds that Cabinet? The Prime Minister. The question was asked once, who is the keystone of the Cabinet? Asked the Prime Minister. His role as the head of the Council of Ministers requires that he shall exercise the following powers. So what are the following powers exercised by the Prime Minister? Formation of the Cabinet. The Prime Minister is the recognized leader of the Cabinet. No provision is made in Constitution for the appointment of different categories of ministers, such as ministers of the Cabinet rank, ministers of state, and deputy ministers. So, who is the recognized leader of the Cabinet? The Prime Minister. The Constitution leaves the Prime Minister at the liberty in these matters. So, who will be appointed in what category? Whether a person will be appointed as a deputy, as a minister of the Cabinet rank, whether the person will be appointed as a minister of state, whether the person will be appointed as a deputy minister, who will decide? The PM will decide. But the numbers, the Constitution leaves to the Prime Minister at the liberty of these matters. But the number of ministers cannot exceed 15% of the strength of Lok Sabha. That is the only binding. The President appoints ministers and allocates work among them on the advice of the Prime Minister. So, Prime Minister sends the list to the President. Obviously, he goes and discusses also. So accordingly, the President issues the appointment letter to the various ministries. Okay. Now, removal of the ministers. The Prime Minister's resignation means the resignation of the entire Council of Ministers. Once a question was asked, what is the significance or what happens if the Prime Minister resigns? If the Prime Minister resignation means resignation of the entire Council of Ministers. No person shall be retained as a member of the Council of Ministers if the Prime Minister says that he should be dismissed. Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of the Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister presides at the cabinet meeting. He decides the agenda of the meetings. At the cabinet meetings, the ministers put forth their views. The Prime Minister would listen to them and then give his own conclusion, which normally is the decision of the cabinet. So what does the Prime Minister do? The Prime Minister presides over the cabinet meetings. He decides the agenda of the meetings. At cabinet meetings, the minister put forth a particular view. At cabinet meetings, the Prime Minister would listen to them and give his own conclusion. But basically, his conclusion is the joint or the decision of the whole cabinet, not his personal feelings. He directs and coordinates the policy. The Prime Minister coordinates the working of the various departments. In foreign, defense, economic and technological affairs, he plays a special role in coordinating the policy of the Union. Prime Minister is the link between the cabinet and the President. So the Constitution imposes a duty on the Prime Minister to keep the President informed regarding the affairs of the Union. So who informs? The President, the Prime Minister always informs. Now, the Prime Minister inside the Parliament. In his relations with the Parliament also, the Prime Minister occupies a very unique position. It is on the advice of the Prime Minister that the President summons and prorogues the Parliament and dissolves the Lok Sabha. Who advises? The Prime Minister advises. The Prime Minister is the principal spokesman and defender of the government in a Parliament. Who defends the government? The Prime Minister. It is he who makes all important announcements of national policies on the floor of the House. Who announces the national policies, all important policies? The Prime Minister. Sometimes a particular minister's work comes under severe attack in the House by the opposition, obviously. It is the Prime Minister who saves them from an unpleasant situation. Obviously, the Prime Minister defends his own ministers. There are issues like caste, wars, reservations of the backward classes, corruption by the people in positions of the authority, price rise and violence in the Kashmir Valley, which agitated the MPs. If an ugly situation arises in any of the houses, the matter generally ends with the intervention of the Prime Minister. See, if there are agitations, an ugly situation arises in the Parliament regarding any issue which is very delicate, regarding any issue which is very sensitive, it is calmed down by the intervention of the Prime Minister. Prime Minister represents India at international conferences. There take place conferences in heads of the Commonwealth, head of the non-aligned elections, the SARC, the BRICS nations. Their leaders meet to discuss matters such as trade, world economy, state-sponsored terrorism, world peace, etc. At such conferences, India is represented by the Prime Minister. Any international conferences, any Commonwealth conferences, SARC meeting, who is represented? Who represents India? The Prime Minister. He has the power to commit India to the performance of certain international obligations, international treaties, international obligations. Who signs on behalf of India? Obviously, the Prime Minister. Now, Prime Minister as the leader of the nation. The Prime Minister is the recognized leader of the nation. The nation looks to the Prime Minister for views on every subject. It expects leadership from him. At the time of general election, usually it is the Prime Minister for whom or against the people vote. During the general election, the Prime Minister is the main figure. It is for or against the Prime Minister whom the nation votes. Basically it is a face value of the Prime Minister. Okay. And what is the position of the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister exercises vast authority both in legislation, and finance. Besides, he may inspire people by his personal qualities, inspiration. No wonder that many writers have started referring parliamentary government as prime ministerial government. Okay. Now, there must be some limitations to the Prime Minister's authority and position. However, there are some essential checks so that it cannot be a dictator. The Prime Minister cannot be a dictator. So, there are some essential checks on Prime Minister's authority. In the first place, there may be dissensions within the ruling party itself. The Prime Minister has to secure the willing cooperation of all important persons in his party. See, we can see nowadays that people are leaving one party and joining another party. So it is very necessary for the Prime Minister to keep peace, willingness, and cooperation of all the important persons in the party. Secondly, there are opposition parties that never miss an occasion to grill the Prime Minister. Obviously, they criticize. Thirdly, when no single party has a majority, two or more parties come together to form a coalition government, it is essentially a weak government. Why? Because since it is a weak why it is a weak government? Because no single majority party has won. So all little small parties have come together with all their differences just to form a government. So if a person generally is elected among the various parties during a coalition government, a person is elected as a Prime Minister from different parties, a single person. So in that case, the Prime Minister is always too anxious to satisfy the leaders of various parties. Why? Because it's a coalition government. If any party withdraws from that, the coalition government will collapse. Finally, the Press and Public Opinion Act is effective check to the Prime Minister's authority. The public opinion, the press, the media, now the social media also constantly criticizes, analyzes the Prime Minister's act. So it is also a very essential check on the Prime Minister's authority. So in today's class, generally, we have learnt about how a Prime Minister is elected, what is his powers and his position. In the next class, we'll start off with the formation and organization of the Council of Ministers. How the Council of Ministers, how the Council is formed, how it is organized. That is all for today.